Madam Sergeant, shall you summon the members? You can proceed. The member for Dennery South. Just for the record, so that nobody says it's in breach of the standing orders. The standing orders do say that 7 members and the presiding officer shall constitute a quorum. There are 7 members.
Mr. Speaker, I rise for the first time in this honorable House to participate in the debate on the estimates of revenue and expenditure for 2022-2023. Mr. Speaker, before I continue, I want to take time to thank all the people of Dennery, Lakai, and Lime for placing the trust and confidence in me to represent them and to bring forward the things that are affecting them, their lives and their livelihoods, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, before going further, I would like to express condolences to 3 persons in my constituency, Mr. Speaker. The first one is Miss Renata Pelage. She died last week at age 87. Miss Abel Christopher, centenarian, who died last week as well in the community of Lakai at age 103. And very, very importantly, Mr. Speaker, a colleague of mine who born and raised in Dennery, worked together for some time in Dennery, Sylvanus Vidal Aite. I want to take the opportunity as the parliamentary rep for Dennery South to express my condolences to the families of those persons that I just mentioned. Mr. Speaker, when I became the candidate for Dennery South in June of 2020, I promised the people of Dennery South that I would like them to prosper with prosper. And I'm here today, Mr. Speaker, to prove to them that in the next 5 years, I'm ensuring that they all would prosper with Prosper Starbatch as their new parliamentary rep. Mr. Speaker, the estimate of expenditure is about people, putting people first. This budget is about people. It really seeks to increase the quality of life through the inclusion of many social programs that were mentioned yesterday. Mr. Speaker, the 56 years that I have lived in Dennery, I have been involved in a number of the issues and problems that confront this constituency. And I remember, Mr. Speaker, getting involved in a number of activities geared towards addressing those problems, Mr. Speaker. And I know the 1 hour that has been allotted to me to make my presentation, that I can have enough sufficient time to speak to those issues and to indicate to the people of Dennery South how I intend to, together with the government of St. Lucia, this government that I'm part of, to addressing those concerns. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries, Food Security and Rural Development received a total sum of $55,866,700. recurrent expenditure totaled $30,995,300. Capital expenditure, Mr. Speaker, totaled $24,873,400. But Mr. Speaker, I want to continue by saying how important the Ministry of Agriculture, Fisheries, Food Security and Rural Development is to the people of St. Lucia. This is the ministry responsible for our food. This is the ministry responsible for feeding our nation, Mr. Speaker. And considering the impact that COVID had in terms of food security, it is even more important, Mr. Speaker, that our ministry reposition itself to be able to meet the food security needs of our country. And it takes me to head 0265 of the estimates, titled Expansion of Food Crop Production, where a sum total of $2.94 million was approved. This phase, Mr. Speaker, included a sum of almost $2 million that is funded by the Taiwanese government for the launch of the 7 Crops program. You will recall that the first phase of this program commenced in 2018 and ended in November 2021. And the whole idea of this project, Mr. Speaker, was to attempt to reduce our high food import bill. But Mr. Speaker, this project, the first phase I mean, targeted 7 key crops that we felt as a ministry that needed to give some urgent attention in terms of producing those crops in sufficient amounts that would impact in a drastic reduction in our food import bill. And based on reports coming out from the first phase, Mr. Speaker, I was told that we reduced our imports on those 7 commodities by 25%. We are hoping that, Mr. Speaker, in this phase, we will increase that figure from 25% to 50%, Mr. Speaker. We have added an additional 19 new crops to the 7 crops, Mr. Speaker, which will bring a total amount of 26 crops that the Ministry of Agriculture will be targeting in terms of contributing towards the reduction of our food import bill. But Mr. Speaker, this amount that I mentioned of the $2.94 million, a sum of $950,000 was allocated for bananas. And Mr. Speaker, you would understand the situation that the banana industry is at this time as we speak. And this situation commenced in 2019 when the Windfresh went into liquidation. And it placed the banana farmers in a very, very, very difficult situation because at that point, the National Fair Trade Organization called, or better known as the NFTO, had to take on the responsibility and challenge of exporting our bananas to the UK. But Mr. Speaker, this government that I am part of, we decided that because of the importance of the industry, that is the banana industry, to our farmers, the livelihood, the impact it has had on the livelihoods of our farmers, the impact it has had on the development of this country, Mr. Speaker, we felt it was absolutely necessary for us to engage the supermarket chain in the UK to get a feel as to what were some of the issues that are of concern to them. And I remember leading a delegation in November of last year, Mr. Speaker, accompanied by the honorable member for soufre. And we engaged the supermarket people, and they were bold enough to tell us, Mr. Speaker, whilst they are very much interested in our bananas, but we need to ensure that we improve the quality and production of our bananas. We immediately came back to St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker, and that was a discussion that was held in the cabinet, and the cabinet being extremely concerned about our farmers and the impact this industry can have on the economy if it collapses. We immediately, Mr. Speaker, established what we call a banana task force. The banana task force commenced its functions in December of 2021, and the objective of the task force was to really take a very deep look in all of the issues that are faced in the industry, all of the issues, because we are seeing an industry that is very fragmented, Mr. Speaker, and we thought it was necessary for us to look at where we are currently with our banana industry, where do we want to go, and how we are going to get there. One of the commitments that we made to Fives, which is one of our banana ripening facilities, which is responsible for ripening of our bananas, we said to them that we were making that commitment to address the quality and quantity issues, and we will get back to them with a strategy and action plan as to how we are going to move forward to continue export of our bananas to the UK. But Mr. Speaker, we also realize that there is tremendous potential in the region for our bananas. Currently, there is a company exporting approximately 4,000 boxes to Barbados. The NFTO is currently exporting 2 containers to Antigua. But fortunately for us, we were able to get into an arrangement with a new buyer from Antigua, and he has requested 450 boxes every 2 weeks from the NFTO. I also want to make that announcement, Mr. Speaker, that just yesterday, a new container comprising 1,000 boxes of bananas left for Trinidad and Tobago. Whilst we are waiting to put everything in place in terms of ensuring that we are in a state of readiness with our quality, Mr. Speaker, we are making good progress in terms of getting into the region and to see how we can engage many as possible, those countries in the region that would allow or be able to purchase our bananas, because we understand the issues with quality. And I have mentioned, and I will always mention to our farmers, that if we want to remain in this industry and make money out of this industry, we must be serious about our quality. We must be serious about consistency in quality, because that's the only way we will be able to maintain the UK market. Mr. Speaker, another project that received approval in this estimate is called tillage equipment and mechanization. A total of $450,000 was approved in the estimates to really assist in bringing new technology in the agricultural sector. We've seen in decades past, our farmers have been using the crowbar and the gardening fork and the cutlass and so on. And I'm not in any way indicating to this honorable house that it is not a good thing. But Mr. Speaker, we are living in a new age, a new era, Mr. Speaker, and I want to see our farmers make money. I want to see our farmers reduce the cost of production so the profit margin will be much higher than the cost of production. And so, Mr. Speaker, this amount will go towards procuring small tillage equipment and other tools that would help reduce the cost of production, and to reduce the time that the farmer or the one would take in terms of tilling his soil or digging his plantain holes, digging his banana holes, etc. But would really bring some measure of comfort. But what is more important about this, Mr. Speaker, is that I'm hoping that this will help to attract younger persons in the agricultural sector. The agricultural sector is considered to be a very aging sector. The average farmer is between 65 and 70. And soon from now, Mr. Speaker, those farmers may have to resign from the sector. And if we do not encourage the younger people to get into the sector, we are seriously going to be impacted by creating a major gap, which will result in reducing our capacity to produce our own food and to become self-sufficient, as a nation. Mr. Speaker, there are many other projects that were approved in the new estimates. The other one that I want to mention is the cocoa sector enhancement project. And this is basically a project that will really focus on the rehabilitation of approximately 123 acres of land, replanting 78 acres of land, and to expand approximately 295 acres, all with cocoa, Mr. Speaker. I think and I believe and I am convinced, Mr. Speaker, that this project will help to transition a number of our farmers and even new farmers into diversification of the agricultural sector. And it will really offer them an opportunity to be able to generate revenue from the production of cocoa, because we know there is a very, very good market in the UK for our cocoa. Another project called Enhancing Honey and Sea Moss Production. And I want to take the opportunity to thank the Minister of Finance for allocating a sum of $300,000 towards this project. And Mr. Speaker, apiculture is a very important area in the agricultural sector. And what I was amazed to see recently when we had this UNRWA activity on the square was the number of young people who are being attracted to this sector, this subsector, sorry. And this sum of money, I hope, will help them in terms of being able to purchase or construct new hives and taking this apiculture subsector to another level. The sea moss sector, subsector, Mr. Speaker, currently has more than 400 persons involved. And as you go along the coast, you drive through areas like Pralin, Monrepo, Miku, Viewford, Labrie, and I was even surprised to know that we have some farmers in the constituency of Grosile who is into the production of sea moss. And Mr. Speaker, our sea moss, from what I was told, is one of the best in the world. That's right. And we should at every opportunity capitalize and take advantage of an opportunity like this. Because just imagine, Mr. Speaker, globally, we are producing the best sea moss. But Mr. Speaker, I have been informed that currently we have 165 persons who are exporting sea moss to various parts of the world, particularly in the US, England, and Canada. But there is a problem that is emerging, Mr. Speaker, because there is a situation where some of those exporters would buy the sea moss at a certain price from a particular individual or individuals. Some may buy at a much higher price, and others may receive a much lower price for the sea moss. And what I have advised is, why not establish a national sea moss association so that all sea moss farmers can sell to one entity that will be responsible for export, that will be responsible for packaging and promotion, and at the end of the day, all the CMOS farmers will benefit, and there will be no case where one is making more than the other. We need to take this industry very serious, Mr. Speaker, because there is tremendous potential for livelihoods and employment, especially in the rural areas like Pralin, Miku, and the southern parts of the island. There is another project that was approved, Boys to Men Mushroom Agribusiness Project, Mr. Speaker, in the tune of $293,000, and a crew wastewater project for a total of $752,700. Mr. Speaker, at this time, I want to move to a very, very, very important subsector in the agricultural sector, and it's the fisheries sector, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to recognize the significant contribution that our fisher folks are currently making towards our food security and nutrition. I am also cognizant, Mr. Speaker, of the challenges facing the fisheries sector. It is evident, very, very evident, Mr. Speaker, that the main marketing entity for fish, Lucia and Blue Ocean, has been closed since November last year, Mr. Speaker. And this has negatively impacted many of our fishermen, especially in Dennery South, Mr. Speaker. And when I speak to people like Jimo and Cork and Jackie and all our fishermen in Dennery South like Freedy, it is a serious cause for concern. Mr. Speaker, I want to say this in Creole. Mr. Speaker, moi vle di dat mwen très concerné contribution ces pêcheurs Saint-Lucia a fait les venir pour manger ex santé. Moi savent ces pêcheurs qui prend chayouis et qui ont délai aidor et qui pas faire de l'argent. Mais moi très concerné that entity a gouvernement mettait en place ba yo pour yo vendre poisson, Mr. Speaker, a trouvé quoi fermé depuis novembre l'année passée. Et que les mois aller en ville, aller d'Aïto à Dennery, moi quand un monde qu'on fouchette, qu'on jimo, qu'on coq, quand dit mais qui ça nous can faire because yo pas ça continuer pour aller à vendre poisson yo dernier rivière la carrière tout partout les chemins. Les gouvernements Saint-Lucie tenir facilité côté de ça vendre poisson yo. But Mr. Speaker, the entity is a private entity, and I don't want to be here indicating to St. Lucians that I know exactly what the problem is, but the problem seems to be a finance problem. But Mr. Speaker, what surprised me most is that the person went into a lease agreement with the previous government, and certain commitments were made to the individual which up to this time have not been met. And Mr. Speaker, our fishermen are the ones who are paying the price for this situation. The distribution of the global supply chain because of COVID and the war in Ukraine, Mr. Speaker, have led to increased food prices. Therefore, Mr. Speaker, we are forced to look at what we produce and consume locally. And our fishermen are responsible for making an invaluable contribution in terms of meeting our food security needs. Mr. Speaker, let me now move to my constituency, the one I love very much, Dennery South. Mr. Speaker, Dennery South is considered to be the smallest community in St. Lucia, but their smallest constituency, thank you. But Mr. Speaker, there are a number of concerns and issues that must be addressed. And when I left or retired from the public service, Mr. Speaker, after serving 34 years, I was called by the people of Dennery to serve them. It was a very, very serious undertaking, but it also took me a while to make up my mind. But I said, Mr. Speaker, if those persons were satisfied with the 15 years of representation by the person that I defeated in the polls in 2021, July 26, they would not have called for Alfred Prosper to serve them. But Mr. Speaker, the issue of concern to me in Dennery South that is most important to me is the Dennery fishing port, what people usually call the Daito. Mr. Speaker, if you go there now, you'll see hundreds of persons dwelling in this area, Mr. Speaker, because that is where our fishermen land their fish, persons from all over the island, even persons coming from overseas who would visit the fishing port to really engage with members of the community and to purchase their fish at any time during the day. But the fishing port, Mr. Speaker, is in a deplorable condition, and it is as a result of poor maintenance over the last few years. But Mr. Speaker, in the estimates, a sum of $1,101,300 was approved for repairs to fishing facilities. And under this allocation, Mr. Speaker, Dennery South, I want to say Dennery South, Mr. Speaker, will get some of those funds to address the problem. It's been years, Mr. Speaker. Combien l'année passée, nous avons un ice machine qui pas qu'à travailler. Et nous pour un ice qui a sorti vieux fort, et bien c'est pêcheur Dennery pour aller en Valia pour acheter la glace pour mettre en les pressions. Mr. Speaker, just imaginez, si y a qu'on a tué, bon 9h, 10h soir, côté il gagne la glace, pour ces pêcheurs à mettre en les pressions. Because usually, Mr. Speaker, they come in late night and they have to go out on the streets the next day to sell the fish. So, Mr. Speaker, this allocation, this approval of the $1.1 million will go a long way in helping to address the issues of the ice machine, repairs to the locker rooms, Mr. Speaker. There's a major drainage problem on the fishing port, you know, and the general improvement of the aesthetics, especially the fish cleaning area. Mr. Speaker, I know this sum may be small because it has to be shared between Dennery, Viewfort, Castries, and maybe other areas like Grosley. But Mr. Speaker,
you serious?
but Mr. Speaker, I will do my best to see how I can utilize funds from the CDP to undertake the remaining activities that needs to be dealt with on the fishing port. But Mr. Speaker, while I'm on fishers, there was an activity called the Dennery Fishermen's Feast that Honorable Damian Greaves, at the time when he was a parliamentary rep, introduced every year by end of June, Mr. Speaker, to really celebrate and to recognize the significant role that our fishers play. And Mr. Speaker, the last time we had this event, it was 2005. But Mr. Speaker, in June of this year, I am going to ensure our fisher folks of Dennery that we are bringing back this event to ensure that we celebrate with the fishers every year. And Mr. Speaker, the event basically involved our fishermen, coming together with the rest of the community to really plan an activity that would really make them feel that they are being recognized for the work, for the job, for the risk that they take. And Mr. Speaker, the activity is really geared towards strengthening the social integration of the fishermen and the wider community of Dennery South. So I plan, Mr. Speaker, in the coming days to establish a special planning committee that would ensure that we plan this activity well. And so by the end of June, very close to Fishermen's Feast, we will be seeing activities like the blessing of the boats, Mr. Speaker, the boat races, Mr. Speaker, we used to have, the tug of war, the greasy pole, and other local talents, Mr. Speaker. And what is usually done, Mr. Speaker, on the Sunday, where we have the big event, we will have the band, we will have the Calypsonians, we will have our local talents, being on display, Mr. Speaker. And so I am inviting the entire cabinet of ministers and everybody in St. Lucia to find themselves in Dennery to celebrate Fishermen's Feast in June or July of this year. Mr. Speaker, on the tourism investment, I was extremely happy when the member for Castries South mentioned that there was quite a bit of funds available, to assist with village tourism, Mr. Speaker, because I'm sure for those of you, community tourism, Mr. Speaker, I'm sure for those of you who have been visiting the Saturday night fish fiesta, Mr. Speaker, would see the state that is in now compared to when we started this activity in 1999. Mr. Speaker, I was part of the committee responsible for setting up this activity in 1999, and the whole idea was looking for some economic activity in the community to replace the closure of Belfashions. And Mr. Speaker, when we started this activity, we had 21 vendors. To date, we only have 2. This activity has been neglected for many years. And Mr. Speaker, I really don't know why. I really don't know why our fishermen, our people in them were not, important as I thought they were. But Mr. Speaker, it was neglected, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, as I stand in this honorable house, I want to assure the people of Dennery South that I will revamp this activity and bring this activity to where it was, to ensure that the people of Dennery South continue to benefit from an activity and to ensure that the spin-off effect in the constituency, Mr. Speaker, continues. Mr. Speaker, we also have many other sites with regards to tourism. And for example, we have the Mandeli Stop and Point. I know many persons, when they leave the airport, they stop at the Mandeli to actually, do sightseeing, take photos. And Mr. Speaker, our vendors have been struggling because the buildings have been deteriorating very rapidly. And Mr. Speaker, it is my aim to really work with the vendors, both at the Mandeli and La Pointe near the fire station, to see how I can use some of the CDP funds to really upgrade those facilities and to take it to the level where the vendors can continue to make money, and this facility will be able to meet its objectives. We have the Fodor Historic and Heritage Park, Mr. Speaker. And jazz was one of these big activities that were being held at Fodor. But in recent years, COVID and other issues that have surfaced, Mr. Speaker, has caused this area to be really underutilized. And Mr. Speaker, whilst I know there is a board that is responsible for the management of this facility, Mr. Speaker, I will work very closely with them to really see how we can really improve and enhance this area, Mr. Speaker, to encourage, for example, our new segment, our music segment people, Mr. Speaker, our young people, Mr. Speaker, to undertake or have activities that will really help utilize the talents of our young people in the constituencies of Dennery North and Dennery South, as well as the rest of the country. Mr. Speaker, I have been advised that Dennery South will not benefit from this allocation from the community tourism budget. But Mr. Speaker, I look forward in the coming years to receive what is due to Dennery, and I'm hoping that we can utilize those funds to be able to do a lot more with regards to our tourism sites. Mr. Speaker, youth and sports. Before the elections, we saw the construction of a new football facility, and I want to take the opportunity to thank the previous district rep for his vision in terms of constructing this playing field, Mr. Speaker. Yes. Mr. Speaker, I am looking forward to continuing the work in terms of the sitting facilities for the ground, Mr. Speaker, for the football ground, playing field, sorry. And I have, in discussion with the minister responsible for sports, Mr. Speaker, from day one, I have been engaging him in terms of how we can complete the sitting facilities and to really get back to our days when we used to have major activities on the playing field. Mr. Speaker, as mentioned earlier, the Dennery South constituency is blessed to have two major playgrounds. The one next to the football field is the cricket field, Mr. Speaker. And many years now, Mr. Speaker, we have been struggling to really upgrade this facility. And I am guaranteed by the Minister for Youth and Sports that Dennery will receive some financial resources to address that playing field and to really get serious cricket activities happening there, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, but however, I'm really concerned about the existing clubs in my constituency. Mr. Speaker, I remember when the All Blacks United Sports Club was formed in 1981. I was the president of this sports club, Mr. Speaker, and right now this club is now being called All Blacks Veterans, Mr. Speaker, because our focus is more on football, and I am still the president, Mr. Speaker. 41 years, Mr. Speaker, I am still the president of the All Black Sports Club, Mr. Speaker. This sports club, Mr. Speaker, I must say means a lot to me. It has helped me develop in terms of my leadership skills, Mr. Speaker. And I think, and I must say, it has been responsible for where I am today, because, Mr. Speaker, I have done a lot and I have gotten the support of the club, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, a few years ago, we constructed a small sports club building. And a few years after, Mr. Speaker, surprising to me, I received a call that the clubhouse was under fire. And Mr. Speaker, I have had discussions with my club members, and I believe I owe it to them, based on my responsibility, my current status as the parliamentary rep for Dennery South, to really find some way of getting a structure that can be retrofit into a clubhouse, sorry, Mr. Speaker. And there is right next to the multiple center an old steel bond shed that I have promised my club, the All Blacks Veterans Club in Dennery South, that I will do my best to assist them with financial resources to convert it into a clubhouse. Mr. Speaker, whilst on clubs, Mr. Speaker, my constituency has a number of football clubs, Mr. Speaker, but what I see happening is those clubs are not organized, they lack structure, Mr. Speaker, and there is an urgent need for us to really engage those existing, sports clubs, Mr. Speaker, to really assist in restructuring and really helping them to come together, because it is very important for us, Mr. Speaker, for our young people to become part of those sports clubs and to really move sporting activities in Dennery. Mr. Speaker, let me move to housing. Mr. Speaker, housing is a serious infrastructural problem in my constituency and by extension St. Lucia. Mr. Speaker, I am moved by the poor housing conditions under which our elderly and vulnerable people have to reside, and this is why we have taken the initiative to remain motivated as we repair and construct many houses in Dennery South. Mouveledi, Jean Dennery, Jean Lacaille, Jean Limay, that gouvernement, ça là, très concerné, et puis conditions kay Adamoun, et puis nous savons l'importance kay les vini pour ces grands moun, ces vulnérables là, ces moun qui ni combien échec qui pas ni à côté pour été, ces moun qui pas ni qui a été peut-être en ghetto qui pas ni en kay. Mr. Speaker, my priority in this financial year is to continue from the work that I started in terms of assisting the people of Dennery South, especially Dennery Village, Lanka and Limay, with housing opportunity, Mr. Speaker. And to date, Mr. Speaker, I have constructed 13 houses in Dennery South. 5 houses have been repaired. And in this new financial year, Mr. Speaker, I am targeting the construction of 20 new houses in Dennery South. Mr. Speaker, there are many individuals in my constituency who can be seen living under terrible conditions, especially on the public buildings, and as I mentioned, the fishing port and in the ghettos. Mr. Speaker, we have to stop this major social problem, Mr. Speaker. It is a serious problem. It's a serious social problem, Mr. Speaker. And I am guaranteeing the people of my constituency that I will do the best I can to help them really, really improve the housing conditions where they live. But, Mr. Speaker, I want to take this time to appeal to the people of my constituency that whilst, I know everybody else who may be interested or may have an issue with their current dwelling house, Mr. Speaker.
Member for Dennery South, you have 15 minutes in which to conclude.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I should be completed by then. I want to remind them, Mr. Speaker, that it's about putting people first, Mr. Speaker. And whilst I really, really want to help them, but I'm just appealing to them, Mr. Speaker, please give me some time to focus on the people who need it most. I know it is very difficult, to tell somebody that I cannot give you a sheet of plywood, I cannot give you a sheet of galvanized, Mr. Speaker. But the elderly, the vulnerable, Mr. Speaker, we are going to give them priority. And as time goes by, we'll see how we can help persons in terms of assisting with a few sheets of plywood, posts and other materials, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I want to move to infrastructure, Mr. Speaker. And I'm first going to be tackling the issue of land rationalization, Mr. Speaker. Dennery South is dominated by government lands, what we call Invest St. Lucia lands, Mr. Speaker, crown lands, Mr. Speaker, and parish lands. And a number of persons, Mr. Speaker, have been occupying, especially government lands, for decades, Mr. Speaker. They have dwelling houses that are constructed for years, Mr. Speaker, and they have not been able to own a piece of land, Mr. Speaker. In this new financial year, Mr. Speaker, it is my aim to engage the proud Mr. Speaker to see how we can begin a land rationalization program in Dennery South, Mr. Speaker. And I can tell you, Mr. Speaker, the persons in La Pointe, in Lacaille, in Lime, Green Mountain, Rocky Lane, and Asconot, Mr. Speaker, I am certainly sure they will be happy to know that at some point they will be enjoying the ownership or title of the land that they currently reside on. Mr. Speaker, on a question of roads, Mr. Speaker, I know I can say for Dennery South we are not doing too bad with regards to roads, Mr. Speaker, because I saw a number of roads being constructed a few weeks before elections, Mr. Speaker. It is as if roads would have convinced the people of Dennery South to vote against Alfred Stabach Prosper. But this was not the case, Mr. Speaker, and it is because I know that I saw roads being constructed late night, midnight, Mr. Speaker, close to the election date, Mr. Speaker, all in an effort to prove that the United Workers' Party was the best option in the last general election, Mr. Speaker. But I want to make a special appeal, Mr. Speaker, for the road leading to the hospital, that road that starts by Miss Carmelite Minimat, Mr. Speaker. This road is in a very deplorable condition, Mr. Speaker, and I'm appealing to the Ministry of Infrastructure to find some way of assisting in at least dealing with the potholes that exist along that road. The road from the playing field heading towards Steve's Tire Shop, connecting the bypass, Mr. Speaker, is also in a deplorable condition, as well as the main Lacaille Road, Mr. Speaker. I'm hoping that in this new financial year, some effort will be made for us to be able to get some assistance in terms of upgrading these roads, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, since last year, July, Hurricane Elsa, an important building, the Multipurpose Center, Mr. Speaker, the roof was partially destroyed, and as a result, the current library, Mr. Speaker, is directly impacted because the roof is leaking and it really needs some attention. This is an area where we have activities like fundraising activities, Mr. Speaker, and meetings, Mr. Speaker. It is the only facility that we have that belongs to the government that, our constituents use when they need to have the meetings and fundraising activities, Mr. Speaker. Therefore, I am making a special appeal to the Ministry of Infrastructure to assist in helping to renovate or repair the roof of that building, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I know the residents of Dennery South are concerned every year in the rainy season, during the rainy season, Mr. Speaker, of the flooding problems in the village, Mr. Speaker. And every time it rains heavily, Mr. Speaker, I worry about people like Lorraine Fauché, Lena, the Elner family, Mr. Speaker, and many other persons who have to face this fair, where they have to be mopping and cleaning their homes because of flooding problems, Mr. Speaker. I know the DVRP, Mr. Speaker, spent quite a bit of money to assist in alleviating the problem, Mr. Speaker. But one of the things I just want to mention is that the Dennery village is below sea level, Mr. Speaker, and I'm hoping that this project will help tremendously to alleviate this problem and to really solve this flooding problem in Dennery South. I get calls, Mr. Speaker, when I'm at meetings, when I'm at work, Mr. Speaker, from residents of Dennery saying that the drains, are clogged with water. The drains, we need to clear the river mouth, Mr. Speaker, and I am hoping that some sort of measures will be put in place to address these long outstanding problems, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I must say the 8 months I have served in this ministry as Minister for Agriculture has been very challenging, Mr. Speaker. But it is my duty and responsibility, Mr. Speaker, to really deal with those challenges and to really make our farmers happy. It is a sector that is very important to this country as a whole, Mr. Speaker. And I want to say to our farmers, while I understand the issues with regards to high cost of inputs, fertilizers, Mr. Speaker, chemicals, seeds, Mr. Speaker, I want to ask of them to be a little patient, and my government will do what is necessary to assist them when the time is right. Mr. Speaker, in closing, I want to take time to thank my colleagues, Mr. Speaker, for the support they've given me since I became this new minister, Mr. Speaker, and to ask of them to continue working together in the interest of agriculture, Mr. Speaker. My permanent secretary, Mr. Babonneau Félicien, my DPS, my secretary, all the members of staff of my ministry, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank them for the support, and I want to appeal to them that the work has just started. Let's come together, Mr. Speaker. Let's do what we have to do for our farmers, our fishers, our agro-processors, Mr. Speaker, and everybody else in the agricultural sector, Mr. Speaker. I want to thank my church, Mr. Speaker, for still allowing me to sing in the choir every third Sunday of the month, Mr. Speaker. And I want to say that the church, the Presbytery project, Mr. Speaker, I will do the best I can to assist with in terms of financial resources to help renovate this building, Mr. Speaker. I want to take the opportunity to thank my new village council, led by Mr. Dexter and Ronnie, Mr. Speaker, and to say a big thank you to the Dennery Village Council for the work that it has been doing in the village and the support they have been giving me in terms of developments in the village. Mr. Speaker, it was an honor for me to be standing in front of this podium to address you on the estimates, Mr. Speaker, and I look forward to continuing this discussion when we are discussing the policy at the end of April. I want to take this time to thank all of you, Mr. Speaker, and to say thank you for giving me this opportunity. Thank you.
The member for Babonneau. Members, can we have some order, please?
That's usually very fast. Mr. Speaker, I rise in support of the estimates of revenue and expenditure for 2022-2023 as presented by the Honorable Prime Minister and Parliamentary Representative for Castries East. Mr. Speaker, permit me a few minutes to take leave as I greet and thank the following persons. I want to thank the Almighty God for giving me the opportunity to serve in this honorable house. I want to thank my husband, Mr. Victor Poyot, who worked night and day, not just for me, but there is somebody in this house who got the better part of him. The person will speak for himself. I want to thank my family for the tremendous support that they gave me during the campaign leading up to the June 26, 2021 election. Mr. Speaker, my discussion today will hold on to the gender lens, giving the gender perspective, the gender sensitivity, and the gender equality component of these estimates. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the people of Babonneau for electing me as the parliamentary representative on July 26, 2021, thereby expressing their confidence in me to give them effective representation in this government. Let me shout out the Babonneau communities. Ekmakaikuye tout. Debawa, Garan, Bogis, Laguerre, Monsiton, Plateau, that's my home territory, Pebouche, Lakwashobo, Babonneau Central, Tishime, Foasso, Chassin, Tetchime, Talvan, Kako, Jiwa, Kabish, Balata, Timon, and Union Terrace. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank my soldiers, my generals, my commanders, and second in command and deputy in chief. We have Linus Justin, Michael Gasper, Angus Florent, Alvina Reynolds, Sandra Dubois, Marshall Preville, Mervyn Florent, and the list goes on. Mr. Speaker, I want to thank the Honorable Prime Minister for inviting me to serve in his cabinet of ministers, and to my colleague ministers for their guidance and cooperation as a team. Many thanks to the people of St. Lucia, at home and in the diaspora, for their support and encouragement. I take this opportunity today, Mr. Speaker, so that I don't forget where I came from, to congratulate the new leadership, the executive of the St. Lucia Teachers Union. They had their election yesterday, and a new leadership has emerged. Mr. Speaker, as I approach this discourse today, I will first articulate in the best possible manner, in the allotted time given, the achievements of this government during the last 8 months and what has happened in the constituency of Babonneau, and demonstrate how these estimates of revenue and expenditure for 2022-23 will support many of the initiatives that have started in the Babonneau community and the Ministry of the Public Service, Home Affairs, Labor and Gender Affairs. Mr. Speaker, I will explore all the areas in the departments under the headings in this estimate to identify the relevant financial resources that are available to advance St. Lucia, the Babonneau community in particular, and the departments in the ministry, which is the ministry under my portfolio, the Ministry of the Public Service, Home Affairs, Labor, Gender Affairs. Mr. Speaker, before the 26th of July 2021, I promised the people in Babonneau that once they elected me, I would give them effective and efficient representation under the theme, putting you first. In assessing this brilliant piece of writing, which is over 600 pages, as the estimates, put together by our public officers, I need to commend them for their efforts. The efforts made in preparing these estimates. Mr. Speaker, I'm very excited and confident that these estimates of revenue and expenditure is a tool that I will use to lobby my colleagues. If you notice, Mr. Speaker, big figures rolling in certain sections. So I have to lobby them, Mr. Speaker, my cabinet ministers, to make a difference in the quality of life for the most vulnerable in Babonneau and in St. Lucia as a whole. Mr. Speaker, we are speaking to $1,842,813,200 plus, Mr. Speaker, a $7.3 million that was given away for zero vaccine. I want that amount too. We have to add that to the budget so that we have more money to spend in Babonneau. Mr. Speaker, the first thing I set on my mind was to put a structure in place to develop the new Babonneau. Mr. Speaker, the shared goals, the shared vision is to upgrade and create a Babonneau Central Village. And Mr. Speaker, I heard about village tourism, so I said, let's get to a village so that we can get our village tourism. Luckily for me, it was changed to community, so we are covering both sides. Whether it's village tourism or community tourism, we are in it. Babonneau Central has everything it needs to be upgraded to a village. For example, we have churches, early childhood centers, primary and secondary schools, a multipurpose center, a police station, a library, a fire station, post office, health center, shops, bars, supermarket, a cemetery, and other business entities. So we have it. And all we need is to create the ambience to upgrade Babonneau to a village. What is missing in Babonneau Central are more government services, financial banking facilities, and a relaxing space for people to sit and stop for a moment before they move on. Mr. Speaker, I will use these estimates to help create a Babonneau Central Village where we must stop and not drive past community. Many people drive past Babonneau. And we have our police, we have our security in Babonneau that let me know. Some of those on the other side who visit Babonneau, sometimes in the night, they don't know we have security there. And they ask for directions. Mr. Speaker, under local government, Mr. Speaker, we started to put structures in place to manage the constituency by first appointing the constituency council. thanks to my fellow colleague, Minister of Local Government. He was very early in addressing that, which comprised 12 councillors. Mr. Speaker, we then immediately established development committees in 19 communities, the 19 communities I mentioned earlier, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I have been using the spraying can strategy to develop Babonneau. That means, unlike what the former administration did, they use a hose. And when you spray a plant with a hose, only one plant gets all the water. But when you use the spraying can, you wet as many plants as possible, and all of them begin to thrive. That is the strategy we are going to use to help the most needy and vulnerable persons in Babonneau. Because from what I saw happen in Babonneau during the last 5 years, only a few got very fat. A few got very fat. Mr. Speaker, these estimates cater for many social programs that will certainly improve the quality of life for the people in Babonneau. During the last 8 months, Mr. Speaker, the government provided educational assistance to 526 families in Babonneau. And that is in keeping with the government's philosophy of addressing the needs of the vulnerable and those most in need. I love this government. Mr. Speaker, as I indicate, when the Babonneau people elected me, I gave them a slogan. I told them, Virgie, your choice, your voice. So I am the voice of the people in Babonneau. And I can never, Mr. Speaker, forget that glorious night on 26 July 2021, when my opponent was declared the winner, at a time when I was still missing 579 votes. Mr. Speaker, thanks to democracy, thanks to transparency. Mr. Speaker, as we look at these estimates of revenue and expenditure for 2022 to 2023, under my mystery ministry, it's a mystery ministry because many people have not understood how I have managed during the last 8 months. The Ministry of the Public Service, Home Affairs, Labor and Gender Affairs. Mr. Speaker, under the Public Service, page 77, code 2011, there is an increase in the allocation. An allocation of $11,246,964 was made compared to the previous period where there was $11,282,971 in the previous allocation. Mr. Speaker, this government, in the public service, we are looking at restructuring. The public service must be the body, the heartbeat of government that is responsible for its efficiency, its effectiveness, and they must be loyal to the people of St. Lucia. They have to give public service, and they must do it efficiently and effectively, and it must be of a high quality. And that is why government is investing heavy in the public service. We look at the issue of infrastructure and maintenance. There was an increase in this allocation. In the previous budget, we had $17,110,745. In this allocation, we have $17,648,800, which gives an increase of over $500,000 to the tune of $538,055. Mr. Speaker, the public service is moving at great speed in looking at public service modernization. And for this, the government has invested heavily, millions of dollars, to modernize the public service, to put government services online, and to save people a lot of trouble, wasting time traveling on transport to get some basic things done. And for this, we are actually working on putting in digital form a lot of the transactions that persons would have chosen to do or would have done in person. And this sector, Mr. Speaker, we have $14,499,865. And that, the Honorable Prime Minister in this estimate increased to $24,531,972. An overall allocation that moved from $47,486,391 to $58,254,500. In this hard government season, government is putting the allocation of its resources in the right place. The Department of Labor, page 411, code 034, we look at industrial relations services with an allocation of $2,619,100. There was an additional $25,000 in the estimates that will go towards capital expenditure. Mr. Speaker, when you look at the estimates, you can see projections for growth. In the Gender Affairs Department, Mr. Speaker, on page 22, code 1501, there is an increase in grants, contribution, and subventions. It moved from $845,475 to $899,200. We look at rental and hire. Page 91, there is an increase from $5,200 to $43,200, Mr. Speaker. This demonstrates the importance this government, and as a minister, I am very much attached and have great interest in the issue of gender and gender equality in the department and in our society. And Mr. Speaker, you are fully aware that a few weeks ago, we were in this House when we passed the Domestic Violence Bill. And this bill has created waves for St. Lucia, locally, regionally, and internationally. And I'm very confident that having taken this position, that will meet the attention of our regional and international supporters and friends, and they will support some of our programs to bring about gender equality in this society. Mr. Speaker, when we look at Home Affairs, I can tell you the language on Home Affairs has been very strong. A number of recommendations have come in from experts in Home Affairs who make recommendations on what they think is best for St. Lucia. But Mr. Speaker, I want to inform you that in the area of Home Affairs, government is investing a lot of money that will help secure our St. Lucian people. And Mr. Speaker, while we speak about security in this country, and when we look at the estimates and revenue and expenditure, and we look at police service, you will notice that for building and infrastructure, the estimates quoted an increase from 4,146,268 to $6,545,100, a difference of $2,399,832. That is the importance that this government places on national security, home affairs, police, and safety of St. Lucians. Mr. Speaker, we look at operations and maintenance, and that moved from 4,203,939 to $4,613,200. And it is projected that because government has invested heavily in supporting the police by giving them the equipment that they need and what they need to do their work properly, they have estimated that hours on foot and mobile patrol will increase from 30,276 hours to 123,337 hours. That means the police cannot say they do not have vehicles, they will be on the streets, and they will protect our citizens. That is a significant increase. Traffic tickets is projected to move from 4,050 to 7,500, an increase of 3,450 tickets. Mr. Speaker, while we talk about national security and how we are concerned and who knows how to manage national security and the police and the fire service and borderly, do you know, Mr. Speaker, that the training budget for policing was zero in the last financial year? That is 1201 in the estimates. And do you know that this government has allocated $145,780 for training? And do you know, Mr. Speaker, that a few of our police officers were recruited? They were dressed in uniform and they were not trained. And that was revealed to me by the representatives of the police force. That's the Police Welfare Association. Mr. Speaker, I move quickly to Babonneau Correctional Facility and Rehabilitation. Mr. Speaker, on page 147, code 2110, government has allocated $1,824,500 for building and infrastructure. That there was an increase of $500,000. Mr. Speaker, capital expenditure is now $2,324,500. And in this section, in the last budget, there was an allocation of Mr. Zero. A building that has been around for over 20-something, almost 20-something years. And this building has not received the level of maintenance that it needs. And this government has seen it fit to engage in repair work to secure the facility. The department is getting attention after neglect for the last 5 years. Don't talk about who knows about national security, Mr. Speaker. If you listen to your radio and your television, you would have known of somebody who was once Minister of National Security. And I have to remind that person, Mr. Speaker, that this government has inherited what the last government left.
I want you to remind me pass the Domestic Violence Act.
Well, when we did pass the bill, all those who had their hands up, we said, hold it. You cannot drop it down. That is what the bill said. Your hands are up, hold it. Don't slam. I need to remind the naysayers, the experts out there, that this government, from my experience, what I have seen, we do not have individual experts. We have a team of experts. A team. Just name them and I will tell you how we will transform the landscape by putting our people first, not like the last administration where the monies disappeared. Mr. Speaker, management issue is a big challenge. And for those who may have their doubts, when you are put in charge of an institution, what is important is your skill and your ability to manage. And for those who doubt my management skills, I will let them know, Mr. Speaker, that you first manage your home, then you manage your community, then you manage organizations. And when we talk about youth, in my 20th youth, I was already president of the St. Lucia Teachers Union. I managed regional organizations and I managed international organizations. I was on the management committee of an international organization with a membership of 34 million members worldwide. And we do not undermine our own people. We have to support them. And I'm telling you that the Prime Minister expressed confidence in me and his team, and so far we are delivering. And the police, some of them confided in me, and they told me of their disappointment with the way they were treated by the so-called expert previous Minister of Home Affairs. Mr. Speaker, if you look at item 1205, postal and communication, there was an increase in the allocation from $57,784 to $189,709. that is under correctional and rehabilitation. Mr. Speaker, under probation and parole, the allocation increased from $1,770,508 to $1,880,760, a difference of $110,252. And Mr. Speaker, this department, under Home Affairs, we are establishing a new unit in this department called Youth at Risk. And this department will coordinate a lot of the issues. And when we talk about crime, we talk about fighting crime, we have to work hard at prevention, Mr. Speaker. In the fire service, Mr. Speaker, we need to commend our firefighters. They were trained to fight fire. But one of the biggest fires they had to out was COVID-19. Mr. Speaker, these sirens went night and day. When they went in all different nook and cranny in St. Lucia, picking up people, taking them to VH for treatment. And I can tell you, these fire officers did a brilliant job. They were on a rescue mission and they saved many lives. The allocation in the budget for capital projects is $200,000, Mr. Speaker. I can tell you they are not happy with that figure because they need additional equipment to do their work, and the Prime Minister has committed that he will look around to see how he can increase that at some point. Mr. Speaker, on page 143, number 1203, the fire service is allocated $145,780 from a budget that was zero in the previous allocation. And we move quickly to immigration. Mr. Speaker, this government is committed to improve on the security of our people and to make travel with greater comfort. People have a lot of difficulty getting in and out of St. Lucia, but some people do enter borders that they should not enter. And for that matter, we are going to invest in border control, and we are going to bring in the e-passports so that we have greater security with persons who enter and leave our borders. Mr. Speaker, just for the benefit of my colleagues, when the Prime Minister assigned me this ministry, it was a combination of different parts of different ministries. And therefore, in configuring the ministry, I included labor and gender under the public service. Because these two departments, they have always been treated as the bastard child, the forgotten region. And right now, they are placed in center stage by being directly under the public service. And Home Affairs continue to function in the way that they did, and we are actually giving them the resources and the capacity for them to be more effective. Avec moi, je dis toujours cette ici, avec ces membres du Parlement, travailler là, gouvernement, pour moi, ça, j'ide, ministry à moi, moi, pour un département qui a regardé gender, ça c'est égalité femmes et hommes, et moi, pour un département laboué, et moi, mettre en bas civil public servants là. Et puis, moi, quitte Home Affairs qui a regardé situation bordelais, qui a regardé fire service, qui a regardé pour police, et puis immigration, et probation and parole, il y a travailler. Il y a chaque permanent secretary pour faire travailler. Avec travail là, comme nous, Premier ministre, mettez confiance en Didama. Et moi, c'est police là, c'est firemen là, c'est mon qui a travaillé Bordelais, il a apprécié ça gouvernement ça là qu'a fait bail. Parce que dernier gouvernement, l'argent s'est découvert des gibiers. So, il n'y a pas rien, il fait tous ces millions de dollars, il prêté, et actuellement le gouvernement ça a pour trapper l'argent pour payer d'être ça là. Ça qui comprend, ça qui ne comprend pas, c'est pas faute. Mr. Speaker, let me move quickly to home ground. C'est Jean Babonneau. C'est pas on dit. Ça dit moi on play my parlant house là-bas. On dit à moi là. I'm there today. Mr. Speaker, when I look at the estimates of revenue and expenditure, I notice some good allocation was made for the Department, Ministry of Education, Sustainable Development and Innovation. And in 0405, Early Childhood Development and Protection, I saw an allocation of 500,000, which is $500,000. 0251, major repairs and rehabilitation of schools. 0219, NELP, Adult Education Program, 59,682,000. EQUIP, that is the program they have to support the schools and different programs, 56,682,000. An ICT integration project, $1,556,000. Mr. Speaker, that's one of the doors where I will knock and shop for the Babonneau people. These estimates will certainly contribute to the education of our adults and the children, because in this short period, I visited all the schools in the constituency. Mr. Speaker, I will seek some resources to expand the early childhood education program and adult literacy program and skills training and access to technology through the use of computers and internet. And do you know, Mr. Speaker, just a few days ago, the government of St. Lucia distributed 3,000 laptops to the children. And my department will be donating an additional 4,000, and government is going to buy another 4,000. I mean 10,000 in all, Mr. Speaker. That is a government that is concerned about the people of St. Lucia. Once a government put education and health first, this is a government that cares about its people. Mr. Speaker, when government give support to education, and as I raise the gender lens, you know who is getting the majority of the help? The single mothers who care and take care of the children, Mr. Speaker. They are the ones that get the relief. Because they come to me and they ask to purchase laptops. They want internet. The children do not have this, the children do not have that. And when government steps in and help these people, these women will get the relief. The men who supply for the children will also get a relief. And that is what we talk about, putting the gender lens to see who is going to benefit the most from that activity. Mr. Speaker, in the last 8 months, over 500 persons were employed in the Christmas stimulus package. And the people said this was the best Christmas they ever had. That's in Babonneau. I don't know about that. I tell you, Babonneau, that's what happened, Mr. Speaker. This is how we are putting our people first. Over 600 hampers and food vouchers were distributed to the persons who are most in need, especially those who lost their jobs during the COVID-19 period. Mr. Speaker, a few weeks ago, Honorable Minister of Health, Wellness and the Elderly reported in this house the number of COVID incidents, and Babonneau was featured in almost every category, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, these estimates clearly outline support for persons who were seriously impacted by COVID-19, and so I am expecting to get our fair share from the pie. For example, Mr. Speaker, Ministry of Commerce 0393, Economic Recovery, Empowerment of Women post-COVID-19. There is an allocation of $2,740,100, Mr. Speaker. Don't you think I should go there, Mr. Speaker? I will be knocking on the door. Mr. Speaker, we repaired 28 homes that were damaged by Hurricane Elsa, with the funding coming through the Ministry of Equity. But that's not all, Mr. Speaker. This estimate, as we are speaking now, it further coins an allocation under the Ministry of Housing, Local Government. So, Minister of Housing, I'm coming this way. Item number 2110, National Housing Assistance Program. There is an allocation of 20,386,300. That reflects an increase of $12,654,800. So, Mr. Minister of Housing, I will be there. This is a government that cares. And Mr. Speaker, when we talk about housing, if only we were using the technology here, and I would have shown you the type of houses some people live in Babonneau, Mr. Speaker, you would not believe it. If you see the holes I have to go, some hills I have to climb, in some valleys, I have to hold branches to swing to get there, Mr. Speaker. But I am getting the people because we care about them. Mr. Speaker, when we look at the issue of agriculture, Mr. Speaker, if you followed the last election, you would have seen that I challenged the former Minister of Agriculture. And I said, I don't need to know agriculture to have an interest in agriculture. I don't need to be Minister of Agriculture to care about farmers, to care about those in agriculture. All I need is the will to give them the support.
Member for Babonneau, you have 15 minutes left.
Yes, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, Minister of Agriculture, Fisheries, Security and Rural Development, under item 0265, food crop production, I'm coming this way. $2,903,110. Pedia Lassani, $780,700. Enhancing honey and CMOS. We bought a Grand Trust. We have beach too. $300,000. And Mr. Speaker, my fellow colleague minister, let me thank him for visiting the Babonneau constituency. He visited the farmers at Maki. I have visited them twice since I was elected, but I was fortunate to have my colleague minister to visit the farms at Maki. He visited the agro-processing plant, and Mr. Speaker, I have challenged my colleague to find out what became of the agro-processing plant that was established under this administration in its former term. And fellow minister, who is now Minister of Health, will recall how much money you spent to put equipment in that agro-processing plant. Now it is closed and grass growing around it.
You serious?
Yes. And the Minister of Agriculture, when he went around, You saw how your predecessor destroyed agriculture in Babonneau. And it is for this reason, Mr. Speaker, I am focusing on the items in this estimate for support for the farmers in the coming year, Mr. Speaker. I had a sector meeting with farmers and the Minister of Agriculture to discuss their needs and their challenges. Well, at the end, my fellow colleague told me when he was under pressure, the people in Babonneau remain convinced. Mr. Minister, I'm telling you, at the end, they told me they were very happy that you found time to come and see them and to talk to them. But they applied the pressure. The people of Babonneau remain convinced that the Minister of Agriculture will make a difference for them. And Mr. Speaker, we are determined to get agriculture as our flagship for Babonneau. And that is why we are starting the kitchen garden contest. And we'll have a one crop production. Babonneau, agriculture vivi. And when I challenged my fellow colleague minister, I said I should have been Minister of Agriculture. So he told me why. I said, but I am the one that removed the last one. So he told me, so you mean I should be Minister of Sports? I said, yes, go and look for a Ministry of Sports. So Minister of Sports, we'll have to find another way to go. So that's the kind of way we laugh at each other while we continue to do our work, Mr. Speaker. On the health and wellness and the elderly, colleague Minister of Health, I'm letting you know that we have identified, somebody has agreed to give us a property in Babonneau to establish a daycare facility for the elderly. And we are working very hard in getting this going. Mr. Speaker, we have to make every effort to improve the quality of health and care for our people. Many persons are seeking medical assistance on a daily basis, and the line item in the estimates should help the commencement of our efforts in improving the health care for the people of Babonneau. Mr. Speaker, as we look at the community of Babonneau, it is a very rich community. It is a community with persons with great aspiration, high hopes. And I'm telling you, Mr. Speaker, one of my challenges, Mr. Speaker, right now we are doing a brief survey to see how many homes do not have a university graduate. And that is one of the promises the Prime Minister made, that every household should have one university graduate. But what is painful, Mr. Speaker, is the number of abandoned projects that were left. What you call the Christmas and the election bounty road. Bounty road. People are just building roads to get votes. And there is a link road between Bogis and Gara. It's left abandoned. A road in Barata, left abandoned. The Maki Road, left abandoned. The Timon Human Resource Center, left abandoned. The Union Terrace monstrosity that has been there for over 10 years, that was started by my predecessor. The agro-processing plant that was taken from the people at Foaso, and the women in agriculture in Babonneau. Right now, I must say that the Taiwanese have agreed to give some help to the women in agriculture together with Helen Daughters, so that we can get more women, especially young women, involved in agriculture. Mr. Speaker, you know Babonneau is the sports capital of St. Lucia, and we're not backing down on that. The sports capital. Lavon Spencer, Kimani Melius, and Albert Reynolds. Just check the records when the time comes. We'll just check the records. Minister of Tourism, we need our tourism project. I didn't hear you mention Babonneau often enough. So, I'm telling you, this year, we are bringing Babonneau Day. We are bringing Babonneau Day back to Babonneau. This year, we will have our Queen Show in Babonneau. We will have our Calypso Show. And we will have our Carnival Jump Up in Babonneau. I'm telling you that. Mark my words, Mr. Tourism, and I'll be Minister of Tourism, and I'll be knocking on your doors. And Minister of Tourism, Mr. Speaker, I can remind Minister of Tourism through you that when Queen Show became Queen Show, your humble servant was the master. I was the costume designer, the evening wear maker, the swimsuit designer, the makeup and hairstylist, and I got 5 queens, Mr. Speaker, in Babonneau. And when we left there, we came to compete in castries. And Babonneau is part of St. Lucia, right? And that brought Babonneau alive. Babonneau, and the name Babonneau, Mr. Speaker, means Babonneau, the ridge of fresh water. This is the community that used to supply the whole northern region with water before the John Compton Dam. That was where Castries, Rosillet, everywhere was getting water from the Babonneau Hill 20 from La Saucier. Mr. Speaker, we have to work on the Talman lands, and we have a lot of crown lands in Babonneau. We have to give the people the land and not giving the land away like some people did in the last administration. We have to complete the Laguerre Combined School, which I put pressure, and they got it started. This government will complete the Laguerre Combined School. And it will be my pleasure to hand it over when it is completed, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, in conclusion, my ministry will give policy direction and will articulate the way forward in the next sitting. For the residents of Babonneau, we are on our way to create jobs for the people, improve agriculture, tap into tourism and the creative industries, improve housing for the vulnerable and access to land and housing for our people in Babonneau. We will not get everything in 1 year or 2, but throughout the 5 years. Mr. Speaker, I need to thank the members of my ministry, the team, my permanent secretary in Home Affairs and in Public Service, Deputy Permanent Secretary, my personal secretary, and the staff of the Public Service, Home Affairs, Labor and Gender Affairs, the Director of Gender Affairs, and my constituency secretary and workers, and the chairperson of the Babonneau Constituency Council and the councillors. Mr. Speaker, I need to pledge my full support for this estimate, the largest ever in these hard economic times, to provide the resources needed to rebuild dear St. Lucia, our country, after the destruction of our economy by the last administration, represented on the other side here of this chamber. Mr. Speaker, they assisted COVID in destroying St. Lucia. I am confident, Mr. Speaker, that God had to intervene on the 26th of July, 2021, and sent us to rescue this country. Mr. Speaker, I thank you.
Member for Ancillary Canaries.
Mr. Speaker, allow me to preface my presentation with some general remarks on the state of the economy, specifically on the disruptions resulting from COVID-19. Mr. Speaker, COVID-19 has left its mark across the length and breadth of these 238 square miles. The full extent of the impact of this pandemic on livelihoods, business operations, and supply chains has not fully been quantified. I could then echo in the background, Mr. Speaker. The full extent of the impact of this pandemic on livelihoods, business operations, and supply chains has not been fully quantified. And now we are slowly transitioning to some level of normalcy. We cannot neglect the huge economic, financial, and social losses that have been incurred. Mr. Speaker, these losses are greater as we were ill-prepared as a nation to face those shocks with such magnitude. Mr. Speaker, reflecting on the scale of the economic fallout, rising prices, unemployment levels, and the slow pace of recovery, this government has presented a plan to mitigate the effect of this disruption in our lives. This budget is a foundational budget for the next 5 years. Despite the uncertainty, this government is laying the groundwork for St. Lucia's recovery. Yes, this is the largest budget in our history, and I will explain why. Mr. Speaker, while the members opposite would have considered quick fixes, short-term measures, and devise coping strategies to safeguard central government's revenues, this government's plan is about the people and their livelihoods. Mr. Speaker, this budget speaks to the economic transformation, poverty alleviation, job creation and empowerment, risk reduction, and citizen safety. This government is bringing the wealth to the citizens. We are focused on preparing our youth, empowering them for bigger and better things to come. We are about improving living conditions, bringing quality service to our communities. Mr. Speaker, last evening, the Honorable Prime Minister presented to this esteemed House our government's intention for the next financial year. My presentation will focus on two main areas: economic recovery and institutional effectiveness. Mr. Speaker, our capital program is financed primarily from concessional loans and grants from international financial institutions and friendly governments. These loans have been negotiated with very favorable conditions, low interest rates, moratoriums, and lengthy repayment periods. However, Mr. Speaker, the key to benefit fully from the concessions is to ensure efficiency in the implementation of these projects. Too often, we have become complacent and lose track of the objective. We have delays for various reasons, and projects are extended. This government is very clear that this is not going to happen under our watch. We will be monitoring these projects very closely. We have the procurement plans, we have the implementation plans. Project execution strategies have been approved, and resources that are required for implementation are detailed in this budget. Mr. Speaker,
Notwithstanding my previous comments, we have seen steady progress in some donor-funded initiatives, which will require significant financial outlays in the coming months. These include projects under the Ministry of Infrastructure, Ports and Transport, just to name a few, the reconstruction of the Cul-de-sac Bridge, the Millennium Highway West Coast Road upgrade, the solar car and port charging stations, the renewable energy sector development project. Not only do these projects contribute significantly to our economic recovery, but they are also key to our resilience building efforts. The Cul-de-sac Bridge, for instance, will address the perennial flooding problem with the installation of a multi-span, two-lane bridge of higher hydraulic capacity. The total project expenditure in the Ministry of Infrastructure is $170 million. And we will be working closely with the Ministry of Infrastructure to ensure that these projects roll out on time and within budget. Mr. Speaker, in the Ministry of Agriculture, we have ongoing projects like the Viewford Water Supply Redevelopment, which is funded by a loan from the CDB. We anticipate much progress in this financial year, now that the niggling issues with WASCO have been addressed, and the $14.7 million is allocated. Mr. Speaker, we want the residents from Bosseju to Binfield, OJ to Latuni, to receive the benefit of this project, which is slated for completion in December 2022. Mr. Speaker, what has transpired with the green gold has caused many farmers to look elsewhere for sustenance, and our government is responding to the calls for assistance. We are addressing the resilience of small farming systems. Through its various programs, the Ministry of Agriculture will be implementing initiatives to improve and safeguard livelihoods and income of our farmers who have been affected and or displaced. Projects such as enhancing CMOS and honey production, building resilience in climate change, and climate variability in agriculture and the cocoa sector enhancement project offer valuable opportunities to improve livelihoods in a sustainable manner. The ministry has a total project expenditure budget of $33.4 million. Likewise, the people of Anterior Canaries will be looking very closely to the Ministry of Agriculture for his assistance. Mr. Speaker, several initiatives are being undertaken by the housing sector, which are in keeping with the government's stated strategic priorities. With a total budget of $25 million, the Ministry of Housing will continue to focus its efforts on improving the housing stock on island, relocating vulnerable communities, and improving the socio-economic and living conditions for residents in congested communities like the one I represent. Mr. Speaker, a significant percentage of our housing stock is susceptible to natural disasters, as we have witnessed this with passing weather events over the years. We have also noted an increase in homelessness and demand for housing support. Mr. Speaker, the importance of housing sector in economic growth and development cannot be understated. The sector is a key contributor to community life, community and citizenry development. The housing sector's contribution can be visibly noticed in some key indicators: employment, savings, investment, and labor productivity. Furthermore, Mr. Speaker, housing is one of the necessities of life, which is required to promote both physical and psychological well-being. Mr. Speaker, the housing sector has the potential to generate employment, increase productivity, raise standards of living, and alleviate poverty. This is because investment in housing affects all facets of life through its multiplier effect on economic development, through forward linkages to financial markets, and backward linkages to land, building materials, tools, furniture, and labor markets. Mr. Speaker, as the Minister in the Ministry of Finance, Economic Development, and the Youth Economy, I want to highlight some of the main initiatives. Unleashing the blue economy. This, Mr. Speaker, is a new project funded by the World Bank. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Finance has a coordinating role for this project, given that the activities under implementation cut across multiple agencies: tourism, fisheries, and solid waste. Mr. Speaker, the total project cost is $48.6 million, and $3.8 million is allocated in this financial year for consultancy. The National Street Lighting Replacement Project will see the replacement of more than 24,000 high-pressure sodium street lights with the LED lights. This project is aligned to the National Energy Transition Strategy and prioritizes the use of sustainable energy technologies such as LED lamps. Mr. Speaker, it is projected that the government's energy bill from streetlights will be cut by 58%, freeing up funds that can be diverted towards other areas of development. Mr. Speaker, the funding for this initiative deviates from traditional funding modalities, as savings derived from the reduction in expenditure associated with the lights that we have currently, the HPS lights, will be used to finance the venture of the LEDs. There will be no unsolicited letters to banks that no one seemed to be able to account for. Mr. Speaker, the project also includes the installation of additional lights in parts of the island with poor or no street lighting currently. To date, some 850 lights have been delivered and installed. Mr. Speaker, we move to the Disaster Vulnerability Reduction Project, DVRP. $43.7 million has been allocated to DVRP. This project is ongoing from 2014 and is still set to deliver a number of sub-projects, including community centers in Castries, Miku, and Sozel, as well as the Dennery Polyclinic. The economic recovery and empowerment of youth post-COVID. This project is projected to cost $50 million. In this financial year, $10 million is allocated to address the skills and experience dichotomy that confront the youth of our nation, a sustainable pathway to economic empowerment of the youth. Mr. Speaker, the objective of this government is to create a favorable environment where youth can transform hobbies into entrepreneurship and skills into businesses. Mr. Speaker, we have created a facilitatory ecosystem that includes the necessary services. This network of institutions will provide support to young entrepreneurs and youth who are in the transitionary stage, also referred to as either not in education, employment, or training, which is aptly referred to as NEET, as in N-E-E-T. Mr. Speaker, as we intend to maintain a high level of productivity on the ground, we need to ensure we have institutions that can deliver. This brings me to my second area of focus, institutional effectiveness. Mr. Speaker, investments in strategic infrastructure lays the foundation for the growth and development of industry and trade, as well as effective delivery of services. However, continuous economic development is contingent upon the effectiveness of our institutions to deliver such services. Mr. Speaker, while we had no time to prepare for the onslaught of COVID-19, it tested us. It tested our systems, it tested our resilience. And we had no choice but to adopt measures for remote working and online learning. Mr. Speaker, the pandemic has triggered the uptake of digital technologies and fostered some level of institutional reengineering in both the public and private sectors. Mr. Speaker, some countries are still grappling with such measures as a response to the pandemic, when we are slowly transitioning back to our pre-pandemic status quo. Mr. Speaker, we also note the many challenges and setbacks we have had even in the pre-pandemic era, and to move ahead with some reflection would be concerning. Mr. Speaker, we have ongoing initiatives like the GINet, the ICT Evolution Project, and the Caribbean Digital Transformation Project that are geared towards making ICT services more accessible. At the moment, if you were to go to Canaries, for example, you would not be able to get access to Wi-Fi, a situation which was dealt with when the last Labour government was in office. But for some reason, for the last several years, it has not been available. Mr. Speaker, how are we leveraging the lessons learned from COVID-19 to improve our institutions, to improve our service delivery, and ensure effectiveness? These projects have significant budget under the Ministry of Public Service to the tune of 22.6 million. Mr. Speaker, I repeat, this budget is a foundational budget for the next 5 years. If we are able to improve our capacity to effectively deliver better outputs along the entire spectrum of government services, we will realize better economic impacts from the programs and projects implemented. Mr. Speaker, commerce and investment are critical to national development. As the micro and small enterprise sector is the backbone of the solution economy. MSMEs continue to make a significant contribution to our development via the impartation of new skills to apprentices, investment in disadvantaged areas, and creation of employment. The ministry's total budget in that regard is 23.48 million, of which the operating expenses is 16.4 million. Mr. Speaker, we expect to see the staff of the Ministry of Commerce actively engaging the private sector. We expect stronger collaboration with partner institutions and allied agencies, nationally and regionally. Mr. Speaker, with programs like the Young Entrepreneurs in Action, Economic Recovery and Empowerment of Women post-COVID-19, and the COVID-19 MSME private sector intervention by the Ministry of Commerce is gearing up to change its approach to service delivery and ensuring the needs of the private sector are met. Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Tourism, like the Ministry of Commerce, will be responsive. Our private sector is proactive and demands effectiveness and efficiency. With a total budget of 44 million, Mr. Speaker, the Ministry of Tourism is implementing 3 donor-funded capital projects with a total of 24.8 million. The OECS Tourism Competitiveness Project and what was village tourism but now community tourism initiatives are ongoing from previous financial years. Here, we expect major activity during this financial year. Mr. Speaker, I personally expect to see the completion of the projects in my constituency under the village or community tourism project, now rebranded community tourism. Mr. Speaker, I look forward to welcoming members to the Jacmel playing field once the lighting is complete, if we could ever get around to what actually transpired in the first place, as well as the Ansari bed and breakfast, the Ansari seaside restaurant, the Ansari fish fry, Canaries Creole Port, the moorings, the relocation of the public washroom facilities, the Vanna Venus Link Road, the land which will be made available after discussions with the Ministry of Housing in Jacmel, in Ancillary, and in Canaries Belvedere. Mr. Speaker, the renewal of urban areas that are susceptible to crime and criminal activities is an express priority of this government. As a government, we need to ensure the safety of our citizens and their assets. Mr. Speaker, would you believe for the last 5 years, Ancillary and Canaries had to share 1 police vehicle between the 2 communities, 1 vehicle. Thanks to the generosity and the vision of the Prime Minister, Canaries is now in possession of its own police vehicle, which will better enhance our be able to deal with security issues. During the financial year, An estimated $6 million was budgeted for capital projects within the Department of Home Affairs. Funding was budgeted for general repair works to police and fire stations and for the establishment of a border management system. In addition, Mr. Speaker, $1.4 million is allocated to the Department of Justice to implement the 3 capital initiatives, namely the Computer-Aided Birth Certificate Initiative, Firearms Examination and Analysis, and Absorption of Crime Scene Unit. Plans to facilitate the absorption of the crime scene unit at the laboratory are ongoing. Likewise, the retrofitting of space for the firearms and examination analysis, along with procurement of required equipment, are at advanced stages. Who is to say, Mr. Speaker, that we were not serious about crime when the last 5 years, none of that was a priority for the last government? Mr. Speaker, if we need to reverse some of the negative trends and set the framework for improved resilience of our people, our institutions, and our systems, we must first be honest with ourselves so that we could take bold and decisive steps into the future. Mr. Speaker, I'm pleased to endorse the budget presented by the Honorable Prime Minister and commit to providing the needed support and effort to achieve this objective. Mr. Speaker, as Minister in the Ministry of Finance, Economic Development and the Youth Economy, I am committed to delivering on key areas such as project planning, risk management, and monitoring and evaluation. There will be no collusion, Mr. Speaker, under this administration. What we say we will do is what we will do. Mr. Speaker, these are all notable weaknesses in our project management system. Mr. Speaker, the new financial year provides an opportune time to reassess the way we manage and implement our programs and projects to ensure effectiveness. And Mr. Speaker, let me say a few words specifically about my constituency. It is one thing to represent a constituency when you born there, when you raised there, and they are responsible for who you are. When you emerge and you decide to represent a constituency, there are differences to how you approach certain things. I believe in the dignity of the people of Anterre Canaries. I do not believe that they are only useful for 1 or 2 things, alcohol and good time and rural. We are far more better than our misfortunes. And it's in that regard, I'd like to thank my constituents, my family, members of my team, my councils in Ancillary and Canaries, and everyone who has assisted in getting me to this particular point. I look forward, Mr. Speaker, to more of their support and their patience as we deal with the mess that was left behind by the previous administration. In that regard, Mr. Speaker, Duvoir Assam, that's the vision for which we are working, and that's the vision that we can only achieve together. I thank you.
Minister for Finance. Remember, in this house, there is one landlord. That is me. If members are going to be playing games, it's not going to be tolerated. If within the next 20 seconds somebody doesn't put on their light, I'm going to close the debate. Mico North.
Yes, I did. 5 minutes, I know. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, as I rise in this honorable house today, I just want to thank the Almighty God for preserving me and bestowing good health upon me so that I can effectively carry out the duties that He and the people of Micoud North have entrusted me with. Mr. Speaker, as I rise, I reflect on the long lines that I saw at the Pastures Combined School, at the Monipo Combined School, the Micoud Primary and Infant School, and at the Prale Community Center. I witnessed scores of young people, elderly people, persons with disabilities, and they took up their rightful place on the line, Mr. Speaker. And you would think, or you'd want to believe, that some of these young people, they would have become impatient because of the rate at which the lines were moving because of COVID. But no, Mr. Speaker. They were there for a reason. Their resolve was tested, but they exerted a certain degree of patience like never seen before. And they ensured that today I can take up a seat in this house. And for this, I will be eternally grateful. Mr. Speaker, I want to take the opportunity to thank the children who are not eligible to vote, but they continue to sing my name, Jerry Meyer, Jerry Meyer. And every other person, Mr. Speaker, who in one way or the other contributed to my presence in this house. My mother, my grandmother, my friends, family, supporters, both here and abroad, and I have to make sure I mention my supporters abroad, for they played a very integral role. My constituency branch, my campaign team, my office staff. To you, I say a huge thank you. I promise you, the people of Micoud North, to be a voice in this house, and not just the voice of my supporters. I think the politics is over. And I promise to be a voice of everyone who is privileged to be residing between the Prale Bridge and the Tumase Bridge, or anyone abroad, or even those like the member from Castries Central who have left. That anyone out of this constituency who has the distinct privilege, and it is indeed a distinct privilege, to be considered a Micoudian. And it would also be remiss of me, Mr. Speaker, not to mention or not to give special tribute to my prayer team, who continue to pray for me even after the election victory. Mr. Speaker, my journey leading up to this election was not the easiest one. It was one of sacrifice, It was one of patience. It was one of pain, sweat, and blood in every aspect of the word. But every soldier knows that you have to engage your brain before you engage your weapon. And the sense of commitment that I felt towards making the life of the people of Micoud North was not by any means dampened when tragedy hit, but rather I felt an even greater sense of commitment when the people of Micoud North took the decision to carry their soldier through by way of giving me their unwavering support at the polls on July 26. I heard the cries of my people and I yielded to their cause, and together we will make Micoud successful again. Together, under the watch of the current Prime Minister, I will see to it that the unenviable position that we hold as the second poorest community is no more, and Micoud will return to its glory days. Mr. Speaker, what we witnessed in Micoud North on July 26, 2021 should serve as a clear indicator to my other colleague parliamentarians that the power of the people is truly greater than the people in power. Those who doubted whether true democracy was still alive in St. Lucia are no longer doubting. Those who believe in the ideals of a safe seat can no longer hold on to this rhetoric. Now, the reason we are here today is to speak to the estimates of revenue and expenditure for the financial year 2022-2023. Estimates totaling $1.842 billion. I now have the distinct privilege of not having to share the time allotted to me to speak about ministry and constituency issues, but rather I am able to speak to aspects of the estimates which in one way or the other affect the lives and the livelihood of the wonderful people of Micoud North. This is one of the privileges attached to the office of the Deputy Speaker, an office which I hold with the utmost regard and with the highest degree of respect. Now, Mr. Speaker, since I mentioned the office of Deputy Speaker, I would like to quickly cite page 25, head 12 of the estimates, legislature. Mr. Speaker, this is the department which is tasked with the responsibility to enact legislation to ensure good governance of the country, to keep the public apprised of the work, progress, and achievement of Parliament, and to ensure the protection of the civil rights of individuals. Only yesterday, Mr. Speaker, I heard you mention that the staff of this Parliament should be awarded best staff within the public service. And not only did I nod in approval, I was also reminded of the circumstances under which they continue to make it happen. And today I know the staff of Parliament are very proud to know that they have a representative in the House. On this note, Mr. Speaker, I would like to make a special appeal to the Minister of Finance, though it may not be in this financial year, to consider making a more generous allocation available to the legislature so that we can see the much needed improvements to the Parliament come to fruition.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, why not this year?
Now, Mr. Speaker, I get to the exciting part of my presentation. What does an estimate of $1.842 billion have in store for the people of Micoud North? The first thing I take out of these estimates, Mr. Speaker, is the fact that it was predicated on the mantra of putting people first. Mr. Speaker, I know that expectations in my constituency are high, and there is a heightened sense of anticipation about my delivery today. But I want to take this opportunity to tell the people of Micoud North that we have to also be realistic in our expectations. Mr. Speaker, when I assumed office in July of last year, and through my campaign, there was a lot of talk about the importance of a jetty for the fishermen in the Micoud village. Mr. Speaker, the former administration proposed a floating jetty to the fishermen, and they vehemently opposed. I too, Mr. Speaker, stood on platform, and despite not being a technical expert in that particular field, I did not agree with the idea of a floating jetty then, and I do not agree with the idea of a floating jetty now. If you frequently be in Micoud, Mr. Speaker, and you witness for yourself the wave movements, you too would be concerned about the idea of a floating jetty. Notwithstanding my disagreement with this particular model of jetty, I was informed by the Minister of Agriculture, Mr. Speaker, that this project was already at an advanced stage, and there was very little that I could have done to change the trajectory of this particular project. Mr. Speaker, I watched with bated breath as the implementation of this project started, and I became even more concerned as it continued. Mr. Speaker, there is a cemetery within close proximity of the jetty, and I can tell you that the dead were unable to sleep in peace because of the amount of noise created by the movement of that jetty. Mr. Speaker, you would notice on page 610 of the estimates that this project costs approximately $3.5 million. $3.5 million. Mr. Speaker, a fraction of the cost of the Prowler and the Savans Bay jetty. Mr. Speaker, a fraction of the cost of the Prowler and the Savans Bay jetty. And the Savans Bay jetty and the Prowler jetty are still standing strong. Now, when $3 million was expended and was deteriorated so bad, within about 2 weeks of the completion of the jetty, Mr. Speaker, the jetty was deemed unfit and unsafe for the fishers of Mikonov. Mr. Speaker, I want to say that in Creole so that my fishermen can understand what it is that I inherited and what was my position as it related to that particular project. Les moyens de un gouvernement en juillet, Mr. Speaker. Depuis avant nous avons commencé la tenir conversation about floating jetty. Nous avons pêché, aller à sous-media, et puis nous avons babé, nous avons floating jetty. Et puis nous savons que ça n'a pas floating jetty parce que quand il a mis à nous un micro. Moi, aller à sous plateforme politique, Mr. Speaker. Et puis moi-même dis que je ne suis pas d'accord pour ces pêcheurs à joindre un floating jetty. Mais les notre gouvernement, mettez une conversation et puis ministre agricole, et puis il y a une responsabilité pour les pêches. Et puis il dit moi, Mr. Speaker, that projet ça il a commencé et puis la pani de bagaille that nous a fait pour nous ça empêcher projet aller. Même si je ne suis pas d'accord et puis mettez still can expect that et bien mettez vle projet à travail. Moi vle ces pêcheurs à joindre un jetty. Moi ça c'est pas vle moi vle yo joindre yo brisé yo deserve avec ces pêcheurs un micro yo ASP yo a ve tout monde à sous côté yo à sous la main droite Savans Bay joindre à sous la main gauche pour aller joindre et puis yo pour joindre un jetty. Et puis yo espérer patience yo ni et puis yo apprend et puis tous les gouvernements et puis à présent c'est un preuve chair Mr. Speaker pour that là où venir pour mettre un jetty il faut qu'on même ni 3-6 mines Mr. Speaker avec jetty à croiser un jetty yo dépensé $3.5 millions à sous plus l'argent parce que yo dépensé à sous jetty à Savans Bay plus l'argent parce que yo dépensé les jetty à Poilin. Et puis, même les dire ces péchés à Mr. Speaker, that même manière, moi pas qu'à doubout à Kaila, moi pas qu'à doubout ici à Odea, et puis prendre responsabilité pour un bagage là me partir d'accord et puis à commencement. Même manière, les mettre un autre about jetty ça là et puis moi bal, moi recogniser effort parlementaire qui était là avant moi et puis on dit mais qu'a dit si pas bon parce si t'es bon il te courir point devant si pas bon c'est ça et tout mais moi je veux dire c'est péché Mr. Speaker that travail là pas qu'à de bout là moi pas qu'à accepter ça ba yo premier ministre pas qu'à d'accord pour yo joindre ça un floating jetty et moi savent that il y a bon assistance là pour moi ça mener tax relief by you, Mikou. Et puis, je veux encourager vous. Moi, ça veut dire chaque patience et puis nous, mais pour nous mettre plus patience. Parce que les choses pas fait. Nous, ce n'est pas magicien. Nous, nous expect that jet is at the 50 years, il passe 3 semaines. So, nous mettre plus patience et puis nous mener tax relief by you. So, Mr. Speaker, I just want to encourage the fishermen of Mikudnov to continue exercising a little bit of patience with us. I have heard your cries, it has not gone unnoticed, and I will continue. I have a dialogue with Minister of Infrastructure, with Minister of Agriculture, and with the Prime Minister as it relates to dealing with the jetty situation in Mikudnov. Good leaders listen and consult. They don't impose. And I have started the conversation, as I said, with the Minister of Agriculture and my other colleagues as to the way forward as it relates to the jetty in Mikud. And in the meantime, Mr. Speaker, I'm hopeful. I see the member for Dennery South just left. But I'm hopeful that the allocation reflected for repairs to fishing facilities on page 611, that the washroom facility for the fishermen in Mikud could be given some consideration and attention, and we can get the roof of that facility repaired. Mr. Speaker, the final but one of the biggest complaints of the fishermen of both Prale and Mikud has been the plague of the sargassum. Mr. Speaker, I would like the Minister of Equity, maybe under the HOPE program, I see as an allocation of $2.7 million there, to consider undertaking a special program, a special social program, which would help with the beautification and upkeep of the beach, whilst providing meaningful employment and alleviating the socio-economic situations of the families in my constituency. This government understands the plight of the ordinary man, Mr. Speaker, and is sensitive to the needs of its people, especially the most...
Deputy Speaker, I don't want to pander to you, but under the authority granted to me under Standing Order 88, if you feel comfortable sitting, you may sit.
That's okay, Mr. Speaker.
Okay.
Yes. Remember, soldiers program their mind before they enter battle. Mr. Speaker, this government understands the plight of the ordinary man and is sensitive to the needs of its people, especially the most vulnerable and marginalized. And this is evident on page 437 of the estimates, head 51, subsection 63, saying social and economic support services, where we see an increase from 9.52 million in 2021-2022 to 15 million in this year's estimates for the public assistance program. I am particularly grateful for this increase as my constituency is a huge beneficiary of this program. So, je voulais dire ça, c'est mon qui est sous les pauvres, that après ça, a dormi plus mal les souhaits. Le gouvernement nous a pour lui, tout pour espérer 4 et 5 mois pour ça joindre l'argent encore. Et pour ça, nous avons remercié le Premier ministre pour qu'il ait raison et pour qu'il ait science. Il a mis plus l'argent de public assistance program, ça nous a créé les pauvres. Programme les pauvres à Creole. Mr. Speaker, I now want to move on to roads. I see the member on my left, that me. Mr. Speaker, there are several roads within my constituency which need serious attention. The Lapot Road, the Volet Road, the Mayet Road, the Wing Road from St. Mary to Loba, the Mamiku Road, among others. And Mr. Speaker, we need to stop playing politics with basic infrastructure, like roads. We need to stop using roads as a means to gain political points, especially in a time when the former administrations placed a special tax on fuel for the repair and building of roads. Mr. Speaker, from the time I was a child, the Lapwet Road has received very little attention. Every now and then some potholing would happen, but nothing significant. I want to say to the people of Lapwet today that during this financial year, they will finally have a road that meets the national standard. They will not be seeing signs. They will not be seeing signs being erected 2 weeks before election and taken down the day after election as a means of, as the member for Castries East would say, bluff and fluff. We will not be utilizing that type of strategy, Mr. Speaker. Flash, yes. We start working immediately upon entering office. We started working. We are working today, and we will continue working for the people of St. Lucia. The people who live alongside the Vollet Road, I want to say to you as well that the senior minister has given me the assurance that the Vollet Road will be constructed during this financial year. No longer will you be sidelined because of your perceived political affiliation. You have endured and persevered, and your road is coming to you. So Abre, Zilo, Fay, Cole, Labas, I want to tell you all that your road is coming to you all in Vollet. I know the people of Pralin and the farmers of Wayon and Pelouge and Mine, Despointes, Malatigue, Maho, Piton, may be wondering what is going to happen with their farmers. Mr. Speaker, I want to tell the farmers of Micoud North that their plight has not gone unnoticed either. And certain pronouncements will be made very soon about farm roads, and the pronouncements will definitely bring a smile onto their faces. Mr. Speaker, despite there not being a figure in the estimate specifically to deal with farm roads, I have spoken to the senior minister, and I am happy with the developments which are taking place. I now move on to page 407 of the estimate, head 48, Department of Housing and Local Government. Look at program cemetery expansion. Both the Micoud and the Monipo cemetery have met their capacity and can no longer absorb absolutely anybody. Mr. Speaker, no matter how we spend our life, we would like to be buried with dignity and somewhere where we feel comfortable. I know that several people within the constituency have serious concerns about where they will be buried when the Maker calls them home. Well, Mr. Speaker, I can tell them today that we are at an advanced stage in the process of land acquisition in Monipo, and we will build a cemetery that will be second to none in Monipo. Mr. Speaker, I'm able to have these conversations and make this type of representation on behalf of my constituents because I listen to them and I constantly engage them. Also, under the Department of Housing, there's an allocation for housing assistance, and this is a very sore issue for the people of Micoud North, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the quality of housing in several pockets of Micoud needs serious attention and revamping. There are still a vast amount of people living in the constituency without any bathroom or toilet facility. Whilst I appreciate the allocation afforded to the Micoud North for housing, it is really a drop in the ocean, given what currently obtains in my constituency. Mr. Speaker, as we speak, I have over 400 applications for housing assistance sitting at my office. I am not able to assist everyone in the first instance, and maybe not even during my tenure. But I want to appeal to the people of Micoud North to exercise patience. We will come to your rescue. The government prides itself on putting people first and has seen the need to assist with housing, something which the former administration did not see as a priority. Mr. Speaker, I now move to CDP, and I know that my constituents are happy about the constituency development program because they trust me to be equitable in the way small projects are undertaken in my community. And the excitement is not in vain. Miss Elaine on Jabatis Hill can feel some level of comfort today because very soon she will no longer have to traverse a dirt track or Tishime, as we would call it, to go to her home. We will see to it that she has a proper footpath and she has proper access to her house. I will see to it that through the CDP program that she gets some relief. Miss Pandu in Lapwet, you too will, through the CDP program, will get some form of assistance to deal with the water problem from the hill affecting your home. The road which was built in Pralin and no allocation was made for a turning point, this too will be addressed through the CDP program. The drainage and small infrastructural deficiencies that exist in Irwin will also be addressed. Mr. Speaker, I welcome the CDP aspect of this estimate, and I want to assure the Minister of Finance that I will use this allocation to change lives and improve livelihoods in Micoud North. Mr. Speaker, the support of the young people for me during the election cannot go unnoticed. I want to tell the young people of Micoud North that sometimes opportunity will come knocking at your door, but you have to get up and open the door. And there is a door on page 563 of the estimates. Department of Economic Development and Youth Economy. The program Youth Empowerment. I noticed the allocation there of $10 million, and I want to call on all the young people of Micoud North to go and open this door, Mr. Speaker. This is a perfect opportunity for young budding entrepreneurs to get the technical and financial support that they need to start bearing fruit. It is an opportunity for Peter and Noel, a small agro business, to get the much needed support to grow and develop. Mr. Speaker, I now move to another aspect of the estimate, the aspect of community tourism. I have said it in this house before, that when the banana industry experienced a shock in St. Lucia and the tourism boat came to our rescue, it surely left the people of Micoud North behind. Today, with the allocation of $9 million identified for the community tourism product on page 376, it gives the people of Micoud North an opportunity to hop onto the train and benefit. We are starting to see a heavy influx of people in the Micoud village. And Mr. Speaker, this allocation provides the people of Micoud North with an opportunity to be part of the touristic product. We have already started to see the signs, and I have met with the Minister of Tourism and made a presentation to him justifying the reason why the people of Micoud North should get their fair share of this pie. I am aware, Mr. Speaker, that I may not get what I have asked for in this financial year, but I am confident that I will get it soon, and I am committed to working with the people of Micoud North to ensure that Micoud becomes the entertainment hub of St. Lucia. We can do it, and with your support, alongside the assistance from this government, we will return Micoud to its glory days, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I also note an increase of $500,000 to the creative industry program. We, the people of Micoud North, welcome the increase. And the individuals like General Biggs and Makonnen and Roma Phyllis Wilson, Yanet Oshun James, have not been afforded an opportunity to develop their skills and talents, but with the increase in this allocation, I feel more assured, Mr. Speaker, that they too can benefit. Pani Domi, Siwen our crew can also tap into this allocation and grow and develop their product. Mr. Speaker, I want to finally touch on sporting infrastructure in my constituency. Mr. Speaker, I do recognize that the Minister for Youth and Sports may be limited in what he can do this financial year, but I did not hear him mention much about Micoud North, and I'm hoping that somewhere in his allocation he can find, I'm patient, Mr. Speaker, but my patience only runs a certain length. The When Playing Field, Mr. Speaker, is one of the biggest fields that we have in St. Lucia right now. Comfortably holds both a cricket and a football pitch. And we have no lights or no lighting facility on this field. And I heard a lot of talks about lights and slurry and lights. And I'm hoping that the member for Grosile would give some consideration, Mr. Speaker, to lighting facilities in and also, Mr. Speaker, to the small Monipo playing field. A lot of young men come from work on a day-to-day basis and they find themselves. That is what keeps our young men together. Sports is that fabric, Mr. Speaker, that keeps that social cohesion that we have in our community. This is grown through sports, and I'm hoping that serious consideration is given to Micoud North as it relates to sports. We did produce a Gary Maffrey, Mr. Speaker. We did produce a Gavin Serrier, Mr. Speaker. So, and Darren Sami used to come to Monipo to train, Mr. Speaker. And we would like to see more people coming from Micoud North. But the only way that we can see that is if we have the proper sporting infrastructure. And I'm hoping that the member is going to give us some consideration from his ministry. Mr. Speaker, finally, I just want to touch on two schools, the Micoud Secondary School and the Passios Combined School. We have a problem in these two schools, Mr. Speaker, as it relates to the playground in the Passios Combined School. We have a serious problem with the playground and the surface of the playground. And I know that the Minister of Youth and Sports is somewhere watching the debate and he's hearing me. And I'm hoping that some the Minister of Education, Mr. Speaker, is somewhere watching this debate and is hearing, and I know that he also has an interest in Micoud North, and that he would like to see great things happen and come from Micoud North, but he needs to create a platform where the children can start to play. So I'm hoping that they can give some consideration to that aspect. And also in the Micoud Secondary School, we've had a problem with the sewer, and I'm hoping that this also can be addressed under his allocation. So, Mr. Speaker, with that said, I want to thank the people from Micoud for placing their trust in me. I want to reaffirm my commitment to the people of Micoud and the people of St. Lucia, Mr. Speaker, and remind them that with Jeremiah at the helm, Mr. Speaker, we are going to return to our glory days, despite the bannership leaving us. And on that note, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to take the opportunity to remind everybody in Micoud that the doors of the parliamentarian Jeremiah Norbert is wide open to everyone. So instead of going around, Mr. Speaker, with loud horns and saying that we're going to take our Micoud back after you had it for 50 plus years, I'm affording them the opportunity to work with me, Mr. Speaker, for the next 5 years as we work to develop our Micoud North. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker,
Leader of Government Business.
I beg to move that this House stands adjourned until tomorrow at 10 a.m.
Members, the question is that this House do stand adjourned until 10 a.m. tomorrow. I now put the question, as many as of that opinion say aye. Aye. As many as of contrary opinion say no. I think the ayes have it. Ayes have it. House is adjourned until tomorrow morning at 10 o'clock.
Well, this is the first day of the debate on the revenue and expenditure of $1,842,813,000. The estimates of expenditure for the fiscal year and financial year 2022-2023. In today's presentations of the debate, we heard from the members from Fisheries Southeast, Fisheries South, Groseille, Dennery South, Babonneau, Ancillary, and finally Micoud North. Starting off the debate today was the leader of government business, Dr. Ernest Hilaire. He was followed by the member for Fisheries Southeast, Joachim Henry, and the member for Groseille, Kenson Casimir, I beg your pardon. That was this morning. And this afternoon we heard from the member for Dennery South, Alfred Prosper, the member for Babonneau, Dr. Virginia Poyot, the member for Ancillary, Wayne Girard, and the member for Micoud North, Jeremiah Norbert. We were hoping to hear from the leader of the opposition, who was put on notice by the leader of government business that if he were not to speak today, he would forfeit his right to speak during this debate. There have been a lot of games, being played here this afternoon as to who should and when one should speak. Apparently, the leader of the opposition is looking to speak last during this debate. We'll hear more tomorrow morning as to what decisions the leader of government business has taken as to whether the leader of the opposition will be allowed to speak or not. It has always been the convention that the leader of the opposition follows the prime minister. That has been the convention. Even when Louis George was leader of the opposition in 1997, he was the lone parliamentarian. On the opposite side, he spoke immediately following Prime Minister then, Kenny Anthony. So let's see what's going to happen tomorrow. It's going to be an interesting second day of the debate. And we look forward to joining you here, and you joining me at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning for the continuation of the debate of the financial estimates for 2022-23 in the sum of $1,842,813,200 as a charge against the consolidated and other funds of the state of St. Lucia. I am Winston Springer. See you tomorrow. Bye now.